But you said something in there, and that's going to transition us to the next topic. You talked about made for TV movies or stories or whatever. Let's talk about Hard Knocks. So I have to say, I have never actually seen an episode of Hard Knocks ever. I'm making that statement now so that
It's
my
okay, man.
ignorance can be put on full display whenever the haters come after us. But you got into my ear on some topics, which, by the way, for everybody, that doesn't happen too often. So I'm really excited to talk about something you actually want to talk about instead of me asking for your opinion on things. But you brought up this fight that happened on Hard Knocks. And for everybody who doesn't know, the New York Football Jets with Aaron Rodgers are on Hard Knocks this year. So I assume they're going to play up a lot of this stuff. But apparently there was a fight in camp. And from what I understand, I think it was Robert Saleh who was very much behind this, or was it another coach?
No, it was Robert Saleh for sure. Like the clip I saw, an assistant coach made some sort of comment to him, and I'm gonna screw it up, but something like this. It doesn't have to be a sideline clearing ordeal every time, because like there was a scuffle happening, and they're like in the middle of it, and it's kind of like winding down, and the assistant's like, it doesn't have to be a sideline clearing deal every time. And he goes, yes, it does. And
Sure kind of guy.
and then segues right in. I think in the same video goes right into the University of Colorado situation where Coach Prime is letting some guys have it because there's a scuffle at practice that takes place, and there's some dudes that are walking away from it or just standing back, and he loses his mind. He's like, "One of us fight, we all fight." You know what I mean? Like you walk away, like you might as well just keep walking to the locker room. And there's been some mixed opinions, obviously, on it. One thing I like about it is that I feel like we're seeing, football gets a lot of criticism these days for getting soft, I think. I like that mentality, man. I like the mentality of getting a little more barbaric, I guess, with this, but that it is, man. Like a football game is freaking violent. And if you did, I had a coach that would always say in practice, like, you get to do things out here that if you walked out of here after practice and did it to somebody down at McDonald's, you'd get arrested. And it's absolutely true. And it's it's combat in a way, and that with all due respect to real combat, I'm not trying to, make light of that at all, but it is physical battle, man on man, battle of wills, all those cliches, and it takes a certain mentality, and I think that you have to do things as a coach to grow and nurture that mentality within your program. I have no problem with it. Obviously, you can't let things get out of control. You don't want people getting hurt, but I totally behind the mindset, 100%.
So I think in both of these instances, they're trying to sell something. And both of these have been underperforming programs slash organizations for quite a while, actually. And if you really think about it, they're both trying to sell what? They're trying to sell hope and hype and a culture change. And I think for Coach Prime specifically, this is way in his wheelhouse in terms of the way that he wants to be portrayed, the way that he wants his organization to be portrayed, and all of that kind of thing. And it doesn't surprise me that this kind of thing gets out there because right now, I said this before when he was announced as the head coach, but this is about as good as it's going to get for Colorado until the football actually starts and we see what the real results are. Doesn't mean that he's going to be a failure. It just means that right now they're 0-0, and they have people convinced because of videos like this that they could win the damn national title. And we know that that's not even close. But from a team perspective, you need to have some semblance of a culture. And I think that Deion Sanders coming in there and saying those things is trying to get away from what obviously didn't work before. Let's not forget, Colorado was 1-11 last year. Whatever it is that they did last year didn't work. So you got to try something different. And in camp, when you have these disagreements, you all should be unified. And this is the time to do it. So I agree with you in that regard. With the Jets, Robert Saleh is not the guy they're selling. It's obviously Aaron Rodgers. But I think that through Hard Knocks, they're able to tell a story. Whereas in Colorado, they're taking a clip of something real that happened and they're putting it out there and people are sort of making a narrative. On Hard Knocks, they have producers and stuff who say, like, let's show this and it's going to do this because the Jets are obviously behind what's going on. So they want to sell Robert Saleh as this badass because he has been kind of panned in New York. Cleve will tell you that. He called him Mac Salad one time, couldn't even remember his name on a podcast because that's how he felt about him at the time. And Robert Saleh now is kind of looking to get rejuvenated in terms of his perception. And how do you do that? Comments like that. Yes, it should always be a sideline scuffle. If they win, it's great. If they don't win, that's when this becomes problematic. So this is the time to do it, though. Both teams are 0-0. The future is bright. We'll talk to everybody in November and see how this is going.
Sure, and to play the other side of it, right? People that may criticize it, they may say, "Well, you, if you're out there trying to coach up toughness and all that stuff, then maybe that's a sign that you're not very talented." And so you're taking the approach of, "Well, if we're not going to be able to outplay people and outskill people, then we're going to out tough them, right?" And but at that level, that doesn't really apply. I mean, maybe Colorado's case, you could make that argument. At the NFL, everybody's good. The margins are from good to great to, out of this world are so small. And, the Colorado to everyone else, they're definitely probably embracing that underdog narrative a little bit, I would imagine. And, so it's culture building. You're absolutely right. I've always been one of those people like, going to be the toughest team on the field and this and that. And again, maybe that is just something people I coach a lot of bad football teams, man, so maybe that's something that you just fall back on when, you're like, "Well, we gotta be good at something, so let's be good at being tough." If we're gonna lose, they're at least gonna know they were in a battle and that shit like that, so I don't know, I could see both sides, but for the most part, I just told you, like, I'm all about that shit, so, sign me up for it, I love to see it.
Thing is, I don't even see this as toughness because I think faux toughness is when Scott Frost last year talked about how his players should be puking 2 times in practice, and that's how you know that they're tough enough for the season. Or your man Dan Campbell talking about biting kneecaps. That's that faux toughness stuff. I think this is more in the line of team unity. Listen, I'm going to tell you a story. When I was a kid, the Patriots used to have their practices at Bryant College, which is, I believe, Bryant University now, but obviously way different. This was before they were winning Super Bowls, but this is when Bill Parcells was the coach, the big tuna, all that good stuff. And my dad would take me to at least one day of training camp every year because it was free and you could go. And I remember one time there was a fight and curse words were being thrown out there. Bill Parcells was obviously in the middle of that because that guy did not have earmuffs or anything like that. And I remember asking my dad, like, why are they fighting? And he basically was just like, this is how you build a football team in the offseason. And sometimes those fights are what toughen the team up and make them unified. It's not about I'm tougher than you or this is a tough football team. That's not the way I see it. When you say, like, when one of us fights, we all fight, that actually applies to when you're on the field. Because if one person gives up during a big game, then you might as well have everybody give up. And so I think of it that way. I know that there's going to be critics that are going to say, like, exactly what you just said from a devil's advocate perspective, but I don't think that they're seeing it the right way. I think that they're trying to find some type of criticism to be had when this is just the way that these coaches, first of all, Deion Sanders wants you to believe a certain thing about Colorado. And you can't believe anything you see on Hard Knocks because it's a television program. It's not necessarily the reality of what's going on. For all you know, as somebody who does the video editing for the show, they could have taken that quote from something completely meaningless and put it on that. And you think that that's what he said directly afterward. You don't know. So don't always believe what you see and don't always try to find criticism in between the lines because you're just going to be, you're going to find yourself going crazy.
So a couple things. One is, for all the production talent that I'm sure HBO has and puts behind Hard Knocks, they still couldn't manage to make Hugh Jackson look like a good football coach in Cleveland when they were on Hard Knocks.
No,
And then also, I would like to see you tell Dan Campbell to his face that you think he's faux tough.
I'm not
Uh,
saying he's faux tough, but
I would
when
love
you
to see
say
that.
things like that, when you say things like, we're going to come in here and bite kneecaps, remember, he said
Oh,
that
that was
before they
stupid. That
even,
was really stupid. I
but he
agree.
said that before they even played a down. And so that's something that losing teams say when they change over coaches. Now, what we've seen from Dan Campbell is there's a lot of hype on the Lions this year, and we'll see what happens, right? So he's practicing what he's preaching, and his team is buying into it. So there is something to be said about that. But when he said it the first time, you're like, who are you to say that? What does that even mean? And he's like, we're going to drink lion piss and all that stuff. That's just conjecture. It doesn't mean anything. I think in these two cases, though, because of where these two teams want to be and where they've historically been the last 20 years or so. These are moments that could be considered seminal moments. But I think that for Colorado's sake, and we're going to get into this on Friday, they're going to struggle because I think that they don't have nearly the kind of talent that the other schools in their division have. But the Jets are in win now mode. So they're just trying to sell this to the fan base and really, I guess, the NFL as a whole, because it's clear to me that the NFL sees them as a team to watch because they gave them Hard Knocks. You know what I mean?
Sure. Well, there's I don't know if you heard the story. There's certain parameters in place in Hard Knocks. Like you couldn't have made. I think it's like you couldn't have made the playoffs in the prior year or whatever. So they want to find a team that's like rebuilding. They're not going to go fuck with like the good teams. And I think if you've been on it in a certain period of time, you can't be on it. So there were only like 4 or 5 teams that were eligible. And I think if someone volunteers, they can be on it. Nobody volunteered. There were only like 4 or 5 teams that were eligible, and none of them volunteered. And so the NFL got to choose, and they chose the Jets. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, right? That's the main reason. Because I think they could have. I want to say that the Patriots were actually on the list of teams they could have chosen.
Never
So
happened.
that would, but I'm saying like they wouldn't have any say over it if the NFL said, like this year, if the Patriots aren't very good, they'll be on the list next year. And I would love to see Bill Belichick on Hard Knocks, dude. Like, love it.
Did you see that he's a Swiftie? He was talking about how
Is he really?
he saw some of the Taylor Swift concert. It was in Foxborough, and apparently it was in like a monsoon. It was pouring rain, and she was out there performing like as if it wasn't. And he said, "You know what? She's pretty tough." And I'm like, Bill has a heart. Like, let's not all believe that Bill Belichick is the guy that he portrays with the media. Because here's the thing about Hard Knocks. This is what I believe. I think there are players that obviously love it. I think the younger players love it. Maybe the rookies like it because it's all part of the I'm a professional now. The veterans hate that stuff. Like Aaron Rodgers, if you asked him, hey, how does it feel to be on Hard Knocks? He's like, I'd rather have them not here because I just want to play football. And they got cameras all over the place, and you have to watch what you say. And the NFL is watching. That's the other thing about it, too, is like the NFL is looking over all this footage, too. So you kind of got to be careful. I almost wonder how many players implicate themselves in things when they're on Hard Knocks that the NFL is like, what do we do with this? And so maybe that's why some of the good teams aren't on it because they don't want to get Patrick Mahomes in trouble for saying something, even if it's not going to make the actual cut. They're like, crap, what do we say? So I don't know. I feel like Hard Knocks is entertaining, but I think that for me, it's missing. Like I'm actually more interested in the good teams than the bad teams. I know the bad teams come with drama, like Hugh Jackson not knowing what he's doing. And you remember, I think, hearing about the fact that there was like one of the coaches on the team was trying to basically have a mutiny or something like that. Wasn't that a storyline with the Browns or something? I
There
mean,
was something like that, yeah, for
all that's
sure.
fun, but when you know the team's gonna suck, like it kind of takes it away for me. That just my personal opinion. Obviously, a lot of people watch it, but it's just not really something that entertains me. I just want to watch the damn football.
No, I agree. I think a lot of people they like seeing it. They want to see what happens behind the scenes. And yeah, that like you said, man, you went to training camp, you saw a fight, your dad explained, hey, this is how teams are made. And like we're seeing that in Hard Knocks and we're seeing that in training or in fall camp in Colorado. And I think that, one thing that always used to use with different teams is I'd always try to explain that I would compare sort of molding yourself as an athlete is similar to maybe a car that's on the assembly line in a factory that, there's a lot of really sort of violent, loud, dirty processes that go into place to putting together the frame of that car and the welding and the pounding and all the stuff that happens along the way so that beautiful finished product can roll out the door at the end. And that's kind of similar to practice versus a game, right? The behind the scenes, like what really goes into getting yourself ready to go out and perform week to week or game to game. And that's on display. We talked offline a little bit, right? Today's the debut of Swamp Kings on Netflix, the special about the Urban Meyer era at the University of Florida. And right away, like that's a big part of it. I won't spoil it for anybody and go into too much detail, but a big part of it is the mentality that he went into Florida with, as far as like how he was going to go about the process of establishing a culture and training these guys. and it's not pretty, man. I mean, it's a violent process, and they kind of go into it in great detail, to some degree, and people are pretty honest about it. Tim Tebow's in it. He has a couple. He's mostly in support of it because of the results, but he definitely expresses some concerns he had along the way with some of the things that were said and done. And but I think that just at that time, that's what Urban Meyer believed that he had to do to put a competitive football team on the field that was going to compete at the level necessary to win SEC and national championships.
I have not seen it yet, and I've not seen the Johnny Manziel thing, but what I have taken away from what people have told me so far, now I'm going to watch Swamp King. I'm not sure if I'm actually going to watch the Manziel one or not because he's somebody who I really can't stand, but I think I should as a podcaster in the sporting world. I probably should at least watch it. But the culture of winning is a real thing. And I think that the blinders are put on when the winning is taking place. As long as you go out there and do what you're supposed to do on the field, I honestly believe a lot of these programs don't care a lick about what happens as long as, again, you perform the way that you're supposed to perform. And I know a lot of coaches will talk a big game and talk about things, but I think at the end of it all, as much as I despise Urban Meyer as a human being, he's part of this culture in collegiate sports that is about winning first and foremost. And a lot of people like Dabo Swinney. I'm pretty sure that Dabo is probably not the guy that he portrays himself to be in the media, right? I think we can all say that. And I think nowadays, a lot of the coaches, there's very few of them that are genuine. Mike Leach was one of them. Rest in peace, Mike, right? He's not with us anymore. But Urban Meyer, what happened at Florida to get them to where they went to, the only thing that fascinates the hell out of me is that their virgin quarterback with Urban Meyer, who seems to be a guy who doesn't really have a lot of morals, and how that was successful with guys like Aaron Rodgers and Riley Cooper, right? It's like, wow, how did that team come together and gel together to win national titles with the dichotomy of personalities? That to me will be the fascinating part.
Was Aaron Rodgers Tim Tebow's backup, or did you mean Aaron Hernandez?
Oh, Aaron Hernandez,
I
there you
gotta
go.
get you.
We're off to the races. Yes, Aaron
Tag
Hernandez,
tag
probably.
that one for the cacophony of gasbaggery,
Yes, right. I
come
mean, it could
Super
have
Bowl
been.
time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's interesting. I watched the Johnny Manziel one, and interesting. It's very interesting. It's worth your time. You're not gonna come away it's not gonna change your opinion of Johnny Manziel, I can tell you that much. He owns exactly who he is, but I think he's got some regrets about the way he handled things as he's gotten older. I think he realizes that, the opportunity that he squandered, but I mean, he is who he is, man. And what's fascinating between that and this one about Florida is just kind of the reminder of really what goes on at these places. We see the games on TV, we see these college athletes, but like to remember that these are 18, 19 to 22, 23-year-old men who are still living college lives, man. And then this fame that comes along with it if you are playing the game at a high level, and then all the other little things that come along with the fame, right? The parties, the women, the money, and yeah, I'm surprised that more people don't get themselves in trouble, honestly, because uh, just I know when I was that age, man, I don't think I would have had I don't think I'd been Johnny Manziel style, like or whatever, but like just to have the discipline to like navigate that and kind of keep your eye on the prize per se, like getting to the next level or whatever the case may be, has got to be challenging. And then to hear stories of these guys that are going out there. There's a story. I'll tell a little story from the Johnny Manziel one where Cliff Kingsbury was the offensive coordinator at Texas A&M at the time, and he talked about how he had to go like drag him out of his apartment in the morning, and he comes out to practice. He's hungover. And he's like, dude, he's like, you better show up tomorrow, man. Like, 'cause it was like a Friday before a big game. He's like, you better fucking show up and play. And he did, man. He went off and had like a crazy game. It kind of reminds me of like you hear those Michael Jordan stories of him going out and playing like 36 holes of golf the day of a game. When he's got a game that night and drinking the whole time and gambling and then going out and dropping 60 points. It it's just bizarre to me that people can do that. and especially at such a high level. And it's I don't know, it just kind of opens your eyes again to the whole behind the curtain side of college athletics, specifically in this case.
It reminds me of Josh Gordon. You remember him? How
Yeah,
basically, I think he had like a 1,600-yard season, and he said he was drunk for every single game. Guys can do that. And the thing about the Manziel thing is he's a representation of what I can't stand, which is people who don't want to take responsibility. And as you pointed out, I think in the documentary, obviously you want to be somewhat apologetic for certain things. But another thing that triggers me is that people use this blanket of mental health to sort of go back in time and try to whitewash or erase everything that they did because like I wasn't mentally right, in which it could very well be true, but there are a lot of people who work through real mental health struggles just to even function on a daily basis. So when you see that, it sometimes is triggering, but I'm very excited to watch that actually now, knowing because you said you weren't going to watch it because you couldn't stand Menzel. So if your opinion hasn't changed of him, that means I'm good to go. I can watch it. So I
yeah.
do want to. Oh, go ahead.
No, yeah, no, you're right. And well, I'll say this though, from what I remember, he doesn't himself really throw out the mental health stuff as like an excuse. It's more like the people around him, the kind of and not in an excuse making way. I wouldn't say they're trying to justify his behavior, but they explain that like that there's definitely more going on there, and more so the fact of like there's these issues that he is not addressing, and so it's never going to improve, uh, sort of scenario. So it's an interesting dynamic, because there's some issues with his parents and agents. It's pretty wild. There's some crazy stories.
No doubt.